Greetings, one and all. It's so good to be together in community. Welcome from around the world. This, as I said, is the third of our four Advent gatherings. The last one will be next Monday with leaders from the Falmouth community in South Africa. Last week we had folks from the Wellspring community. The week before that, it was Alex from the Corrymeela community. But tonight, it is my dear and deep pleasure to welcome Tony Jaques from the Othona Community. Tony, we have met, I guess, well, we certainly met this year at Greenbelt, but we also met quite a long time ago when I came to visit the Othona Community, I guess.
Yeah, and we were in touch when you were editing Coracle, I think.
That's right. Yeah, we go
Yeah.
back a little bit of a way. I think I came to visit the Othona Community when I was working for the Living Spirituality Network of
Mhm.
CTBI way back in the 1990s. And so I have a picture of that part of England, the south of England, where both of the centres are. Um, but I wonder if, Tony, you could introduce yourself to us. Um, and I guess tell us a bit about your own connection with the Othona community. What led you to join the community? How long have you been a member? What led you to be the warden? I believe that's your title, be the warden there. And if in the process you could also share with us a bit about the story, the origin story of Othona, that'd be wonderful. Over to you, Tony.
Okay, not much altogether. No, it's a real treat to be invited to do this with the Iona community for reasons that will become particularly obvious as I talk a little bit about the origins in a moment. Perhaps easiest to start by saying what we are. We have two centres, one here on the coast of Dorset and one on the coast of Essex. Both really near the sea, lovely places, fairly unspoilt, very different geographically. Essex is flat as a pancake, and here we aren't. But both places offer to all comers a whole range of events through the year. Retreats, we are partly retreat centres, but also family holidays at appropriate times, courses, working weeks, all kinds of things. But it's always about people being in community together, having a brief experience of community, which we hope they take home with them. Whatever has been the particular theme or purpose or activity when they're staying with us. And many people have been coming to one or both, one or other or both of those centres for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. We have some people in the community who are third or fourth generation. And at both centres, we partner with other organisations in either short-term ways, church bookings and things like that, or slightly longer term. We are organisations as varied as 12-step groups, people working with particular work with refugees and asylum seekers. The other centre has been particularly in Essex, has particularly strong connections with people like Arosha and Green Christian, working in that whole environmental field. So both places have Christian history long before Othona was there. And that's why we went to the first one in Essex, which began back in 1946, because we meet 2 fields away from a 7th century chapel built in 654 by St. Ced, who'd come down from Lindisfarne. So the connection goes back via Lindisfarne to Iona. And arguably the oldest still used as a Christian place of worship church in England. It's a little like a stone barn on the edge of the Essex marshes, out on the edge of a farm. It's a wonderful place. St. Peter's on the Wall, it's known as. And here in Dorset, where I am, the house and property we've occupied since 1965 was given to us by the trustees of a community that had lived here and died out. A small group, mainly of women, called the Community of Christian Contemplatives, who through the middle years of the 20th century had lived a life here devoted to self-sufficiency and to contemplative prayer and prayer for healing. And we have small resident teams, what we call a core community in each case, who live at these two places and keep them running. And both places are massively dependent on volunteers involved in every kind of way as well, from the level of trustees of the charity right down to somebody who comes and volunteers, who has a great passion for digging out bramble roots. Bless him. Oh,
Very valuable skill. Yeah.
absolutely vital skill in a place like this that grows them so well. And our daily life is structured around shared meals, other activities, shared worship, which here in Dorset, it's very simple, and we tend to call it seed time in the morning and harvest in the evening.
What a lovely bookending of the day.
Yeah, and I'm going to perhaps share a little bit from one of those later on. They're very simple and very inclusive. I think one of the things that Othona's been particularly good at over the years has been involving many people who perhaps have been hurt by their involvement with church.
Okay.
And now are happy to identify as spiritual but not religious, not sure where they are about Christianity, about Jesus, but are open to that conversation. So we trust that many of them find that seed time and harvest speak to them and speak for them.
Would you say, Tony, that the roots of Othona, I mean, I love that connection with back to this early 7th century chapel, and the sisters, the community of Christian contemplation, you're inheritors of a place of prayer, a
We
place
are.
of self-sufficiency. Do you call yourselves a Christian community?
Oh yes,
yeah, even though people who come don't need to subscribe necessarily.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We draw on other inspirations as well, but we are a Christian community.
You are a Christian community, and you find that you're particularly welcoming people who are feeling in some way or other ambivalent about or hurt by the institutions of religions.
Yeah, quite a lot of people.
Yeah.
Whose background, and some who've been involved for many years in their churches and perhaps are now stepping out of that, but still wanting to stay involved with people with that are pursuing the same values and some of the same message, but can't necessarily carry on with all the particular structures or doctrines of the place where they have been. I think we have quite a high proportion of people like among our regulars. And
what about, does Othona have a relationship with the established churches as a community, or?
Oh yeah, very much so. The chapel in Essex is actually in the ownership of the Church of England. We only use it by their permission, and the relationship has always been very strong there with the diocese and with the local church and other churches. Here in Dorset, that's been patchier over the years at different times, but at the minute I'm just working very closely with our new local rector on putting together something for here for Candlemas with the local churches. Candlemas is nicely it shares a date with the old Celtic festival of Imbolc, but also St. Bride's Day. St. Bride, Brigid, in pre-Christian times seemed to get kind of Christianized as St. Bride, and we live in an area known as the Bride Valley with the River Bride flowing through it. So that's all very local and as well as topical when we get to the 2nd of February. We'll have lots and lots of candles.
And a deep dark winter in this part of the world as well. I know we have some friends on the screen from the southern hemisphere, but yeah, where it's not dark in the winter time, or in February and January and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tony, just I maybe distracted you by questions about the church and so on, but the origin story. So, what was the founding story of Othona? Was there an individual? Was there a group? Was there an event?
I was coming to that. There was definitely an individual. His name was Norman Motley. He was an Anglican priest He'd been an RAF chaplain, the youngest chaplain during the Second World War. And it was out of that experience and ministering to people, particularly in a big RAF training camp, many of them who had been part of the worshipping community there went off to the various theatres of war where they were going to fly with little crosses made out of 4 small household nails to signify connection with each other after what they'd experienced of community, actually, within those few weeks of training before they went off to risk their lives. And after the war, Norman felt, and some of the people who'd been involved with him at that time, very strongly that something needed to carry on. There were so many things at the end of the Second World War, this was reflected, of course, in the politics of the time too, but where people didn't want to simply re-erect the old barriers. They didn't want to re-erect all the old barriers between different parts of the Christian church either. Norman had got in trouble as a chaplain because he insisted on ministering to anybody, whether they were Anglican or not. And that didn't go down well with some of his fellow chaplains and other people at times. But that spirit was continued in what became the experiment of the Othona community, and what was initially, just for many years, was just really a lengthy summer camp.
Okay.
But in the field adjacent to that 7th century chapel.
And did it attract a particular group of people? Did it attract young people at the time, or people who would come to those summer camps?
It was a very varied, from what I understand of it and what I've seen, it was a very varied set of ages and backgrounds. People from really quite privileged backgrounds and people from absolutely the other end of the spectrum. There were significantly Germans involved from the first year. So reconciliation was one of the 2 strong themes for the community in those early days, and the other, I think, would have been ecumenism, greater contact between the various Christian churches, which we have to pinch ourselves. And remember how that was very rare in those days.
Yeah. And people were looking for community. They were looking for this an experience where they could explore reconciliation, that this deeper unity, but in intentional community. Would that be right? They were looking to live together and looking for a rhythm of prayer and shared common life, or
that's certainly what they got.
They
didn't know what they were looking for. But once you got down to the Essex coast, it was hard to get away again. Some people said, and many people who came there thinking, I really don't want to do this. After a day or 2, found themselves absolutely hooked. It's a story that came back again and again. Norman said that the daily life of the community should involve work, worship, study, and prayer.
A nice quartet.
No, I've actually said it wrong. Work, worship, study, and play.
Oh, how lovely!
And the play has always been important too. Trust me to get it wrong. Work, worship, study, and play. Not necessarily in equal proportions, but some sense of those things.
Thinking back to that time, just post-war or mid-war, and so presumably you're going to be celebrating your 80th birthday next year. Is that right?
We are, yeah.
Well, let's get on to that. Let's share a cake at some point and celebrate with you. But isn't it interesting and not at all surprising that so many of our intentional Christian communities, and I'm thinking of Iona, Corrimila, the Agape community in the north of Italy, the Thésée community, Grandchamp in France, have grown out of a situation of conflict and war, and saying there needs to be a different way of being together. Let us, in this tender time of post-violence and deep bloodshed, let's find a different way to live together. And I guess, we felt there was a similar kind of surge. I don't know if you felt it just during and after the pandemic, when people were saying, we need to find a different way of being together in the world. And there was a surge of interest in the kinds of communities that you and I have been part of for many years. It's not, as I said, it's not surprising. It's not necessarily rocket science, but it is interesting to notice these patterns, isn't it? And to ask, and there was a similar growth of these communities in North America with Five Oaks and Naramata and Tatamagouche and Kirkridge and so on. Tony, just tell us a bit about your story then. What was your connection?
Well, first. Yeah, well, I will. I'll mention
Yes,
you. But
go.
I do want to pick up one of the other influences
Yeah,
on Norman Motley in setting this. There he is, by the way. That was Norman Motley. Um,
wonderful.
and he wrote in his last illness. He died in 1980. He wrote a book about Othona's past. And one of the stories that has lived most strongly with me in that is this. And he says it was September 1945. I think it was actually August. I think he just didn't check his dates back. A friend and I went to meet George MacLeod, founder
Yeah.
of the Iona Community. But they didn't just meet him. We spent a night together in a rowing boat in the Sound of Mull. We were stunned by the news of the preceding day telling of the dropping of the first atomic bomb on Japan.
My goodness.
Yeah, the Christian bomb, as it is called in some Eastern countries. A new age had dawned, and one which filled men and women with unimaginable horror. That's what Norman wrote all those years afterwards, and I well up reading it whenever I do, I'm afraid. I knew that this
Not
would happen.
surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did they do in that little boat all night long? I suspect they really talked about what are we called to do? What can we do in such a time? I suspect they talked about community. I'm damn sure they did.
I bet they
Um,
did. Yep.
I imagine there was a bottle of something warming as well to
Yeah.
pass around if I know Norman, and I suspect that was true for George as well.
Yeah.
And I'm absolutely sure that Norman had been inspired by what he knew of Iona. The fact that our name happens to chime slightly with Iona, Othona. I think when the name Othona actually came from the old historic Roman fort,
Ah, okay.
out of the stones of which St. Ced built his chapel.
Okay. Okay.
Right the way back. And that wasn't the end of his contacts with George MacLeod, because he goes on to say George MacLeod had literally dreamt on more than one occasion that I should try to rebuild Glastonbury Abbey. Yeah. He sent me a telegram from Scotland about it. And anxious to follow every avenue, I went with some friends. So Norman goes and visits and decides that taking on Glastonbury Abbey is just a little bit too much. And knowing what Glastonbury has become in the years since, wow, we would be
Isn't
very,
that interesting? I mean, I like to think that George was a man of his dreams, and I'm sure he was. I
yeah,
also imagine he was simply, really encouraging a thread that he saw, or a charism that he saw in Norman,
yeah,
and recognizing a kindred spirit. Um, what
I'm
an
sure he
interesting
was.
story. Was there ever any mileage in rebuilding Glastonbury Abbey? I mean, did they dismiss the idea quite quickly, or was there ever any mileage in that?
No, he dismissed it very quickly.
Okay.
We felt we should travel light. I'm not sure we're traveling as light now as he thought we should.
Okay.
But yeah, no, he felt that wasn't. He looked at various places until he found he was drawn to that chapel on the Essex coast
Mm.
the following spring.
Okay, so that was 1946, and you're right, it would have been early August 1945 in that boat.
Yeah.
And what a remarkable moment to mark in a boat on the Sound of Mull. Although Sound of Mull would be between Mull and the mainland.
Well, I think he may have not
He may have meant
again
the
not
Sound of
known.
Iona,
Yeah, I
between Mull
suspect
and
so.
Iona, but let's not get too um, technical about this. And what a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing.
You
Yeah.
asked me about me.
Yes.
So very briefly, I visited Othona in Essex the very weekend after I left university. I'd already been motivated by contacts with Taizé, Little Gidding, Anglican Franciscan community, things like that. And but when I got to Othona, something told me this might be the place, the community where I might hang my hat. On the edge of my county of origin, which was Essex. This kind of very informal, slightly chaotic community out on the edge of the marshes.
Mm.
And I was involved in various voluntary ways from that. That was 1976. From then on and in 1995, I just decided to come to the end of a 10-year career in radio broadcasting in London. And the opportunity came up to become warden here with my then wife. And I should make clear, I'm not the leader of the Othona community. I'm warden and leader here, and various other people have been during my time wardens at our Essex Centre. Since Norman's death, the Othona community has not had a leader.
Okay. Yeah.
Whether that's been helpful or not, that's a situation.
Yeah.
But
And you managed to hang together. You coordinate, and I know you've got you're working on a launch of a new website that's going to help bring these things together at some point. But
yes, yes.
yeah.
Yes, if anybody is motivated to Google Othona after this, we are on the cusp, possibly tomorrow or possibly later this week, of retiring our existing websites, plural, and creating one new website, launching one new website. But beware if you do go there, because new websites always have teething problems.
Yeah. Yes, let's not get too hasty, but that's great. But
good enough, but it
yeah,
won't yet be all that we want it to be. We know that.
but you work hand in glove with the two centres, is that right? You work closely
Yeah,
together.
we do a lot of the time, as is true of so many of our sister communities and organizations. The actual people on the ground are working so hard just trying to do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
That the communication time with others elsewhere is less than we'd like, but we do work with them, and we've certainly been working together on this website.
Tony, thank you for that wonderful and a really fascinating story of Othona, its origins, your connection. I have three kind of chunky questions, the third of which does take us to the theme of Advent specifically. But so I'm aware that there are something. What's this got to do with Advent? We'll come to that most definitely. But I wanted, before we get there, we're reflecting on what it means to be intentional communities in Advent. And so my second chunky question is about the shared sense of calling that we have, Othona and Iona, with these other communities, to somehow live together in community. You talked about your resident team, your rhythm of worship, your rhythm of meals, your rhythm of welcoming people. That's very familiar to those of us within the Iona community, where we have the Abbey that is a place of welcome and hospitality, and Camas, and also our dispersed community, where we have our local family groups, where there's a similar sense of welcome and hospitality. What is it that binds us together? We're committed to the gospel of Christ, to the radical call in that gospel to work for justice, for peace, for wholeness, for reconciliation. And we're called as intentional communities to live out this call in a very specific way. What do you consider to be the importance of intentional Christian communities today, particularly in the times that we're living through? Why does the world need communities like Iona, like Othona? What do you think is ours to do and ours to be right now?
I want to preface it by saying that having heard the two previous Mondays, it just brought home to me how much we feel like very, very junior partners. In terms of, because one thing Othona has not developed as fully as it might have done and might yet do, who knows, is the kind of actively committed membership structure with the sort of forms of commitment and support in cell groups or family groups that I think you have, that Coromila in its different way has had.
Yeah, and Wellspring has.
Wellspring certainly has.
Sure.
And I think probably it is an important question for Othona in the next very few years, whether it does move somewhat in that direction, because we're also, and most Othona people don't even know this yet, but through the trustees, we're working at the moment towards rethinking and revamping the idea of membership.
Okay.
Now, whether that will develop more towards the kind of thing and mutual support that your communities have
Okay.
remains to be seen. But I think it's a potential, and perhaps it's. I hope we will take on board some of the experience that's been shared in these conversations, actually,
Sure.
because I think that's really important. You'd warned me about this question, and I reflected on it and tried to go back to the nub of it. What is it that we are? What is given us to do as intentional communities? And I kept finding the old phrase, keeping the rumor of God alive.
Mm.
I don't know who first said that. Somebody out there may know. And sometimes it feels as if that's almost that there's little more we can do. And I think it's an honourable calling. It seems to me that people my age have lived through what may prove to have been a kind of high tide of secularism.
Okay.
When keeping that rumor alive has been problematic, but really worth doing. And maybe things are turning around a bit now. I don't know if you could hear, but I've got torrential rain outside now.
Oh,
I hope it isn't interfering with the audio. Many of us may be aware of people discussing a so-called quiet revival at
yeah.
the moment, backed up by not only people's own experience, but by bits of research.
For those who don't know what that, do
Yeah.
you want to say a bit about what that quiet revival is? And by the way, I've just seen a question also about, there's an assumption here, and I apologize for the jargon, that we've introduced the notion of intentional communities without actually saying what we think it actually is. For me, an intentional community is a deliberate opting in, a constructive decision by individuals to join together in community, whether that's in a place like Othona or Iona Abbey, or in the Iona community through a family group or a regional group, where you opt into a commitment, sometimes around a rule of life. And you in the Iona community, we members opt in every year. We reaffirm our commitment. So there's a you don't just find yourself in community, you actually actively seek out religious community, but where people, and in our case, many of us actually spend time in each other's company, whether that's living together for a while at one of our centres, or whether that's meeting together on a monthly basis in a local family group. That's what we mean by intentional. And this notion of quiet revival, Tony, do you want to just say a little bit about what that is?
Yes, that's the perception, and there seems to be there is some good evidence for this,
Yeah.
of uh, a quite a growing interest and number of more, particularly young people,
Mm.
approaching certainly some churches and communities, seeking. And it's reflected in things like numbers of sales of Bibles and things like that, which have shot up since the pandemic, apparently. My own suspicion is that we now have younger generations who have been brought up with very little contact with religion at all,
Mm.
for instance, at school, and therefore not inoculated in the way that some people of my generation felt they were. And therefore they can approach certainly the essentials, what I'd think of as the spiritual essentials of prayer and meditation, the very notion of God, without those things being already laden with assumptions.
Mm.
And that may be one of the reasons why people are crossing the thresholds of churches and communities in greater numbers again. It's yeah. I think this is clearly intriguing, interesting, encouraging, also a bit unsettling in some ways, because again, part of the evidence is that, especially young men, there's quite a lot of young men turning up, which is great. Communities like yours and mine have probably found it far easier to have women come to our doors in recent years. Would that be the case for Iona?
Um, Possibly. I haven't done the stats recently, but yeah, I mean,
Mm.
that's probably in terms of our guests at the centres. Yes, I think so, and probably also in terms of our volunteers. But yeah, I mean, and is there something unique about the living together in community that is drawing some is fueling this quiet revival, or is enhancing it, do you think?
I, I don't know about that. I think that where where there's evidence of that, for instance, in some of the monastic communities,
Mm,
um, that would be an attraction also just to the idea of a contemplative life.
mm,
Um, but I was going to say one of the unsettling aspects of it
mm.
is that some of the manifestations of Christianity that young men particularly seem to be attracted to are pretty patriarchal,
Sure.
not very accepting of women's
Yeah,
role,
yeah,
let alone of other forms of
yeah.
diversity.
And I
Uh,
think that the revival that we're seeing might be into a more conservative approach to religious
yeah,
life,
yeah.
which has its own threads and
Mm.
nuances. Um, I think let's move, Tony,
I
to our
think,
next.
I just feel that I'm
Mm,
interested by it. I think it's far too early to analyze it.
sure.
And I feel for people like ourselves, do we have wisdom and experience to offer in the context of if there is that kind of revival, but also have we got something to learn from it,
Yeah, and I think
rather
we're
than
not.
assuming that we
Yeah,
need to be
that's
telling
right.
other people.
And I don't know that certainly. I don't know that George MacLeod thought that the founding of the Iona community would mean that there would always be a pattern established once and for all time, and that's how it would always be. So certainly for us, there's always a desire to ask: Is this? Are we still called to be this kind of community where we are today? And
Mm.
we pray, if it be your holy will, may we continue still to be a sanctuary and a light. So we seek that discernment, I guess, from God and with one another about what is ours now to do in these troubling times. Tony, let me turn to the third chunky area, and then we're gonna pause and see if anyone wants to come and join us. Here we are, halfway through the season of Advent, the season of waiting, of anticipation, of the birth of the Prince of Peace, um, a season of themes of love and faith and hope and new life. The question really is, what does this season of Advent offer or mean to you, to your community? What are we waiting for as a community? Does this season hold particular resonances for you in Othona, as an intentional Christian community? Um, and what does the pattern of the Christian year and the coming of the Savior, in particular of Jesus, what does that offer to you, to us, as we seek to do God's will in this world?
Mm. Right. Mhm. It's a big question because it opens up onto some really weighty
Mm,
questions, I think. At the level, the most obvious level, yeah, we there was a lovely Advent carol service in the 7th century chapel of St. Peter recently. I think I founded the idea of our having a service there at that time, 40 years ago, something like that. And we look forward here in Dorset. We are actually going through a very quiet period this month. Thank goodness, because we're working on that website until people will be here over Christmas, and another group of people here with us over New Year. We'll have full houses both those times, and we look forward. Christmas here is really starts for me when we have carol singing in the barn of our local organic farm on Christmas Eve,
okay.
5 o'clock, always with some animals um,
Mhm.
as well at the door, and the farm, as the new generation of the farmers started a couple of months ago with baby Hector. So I hope Hector will be standing in for the baby in the manger.
Yeah.
So all those kind of things. I think many churches over these 4 weeks talk of love, joy, peace, and hope as Advent themes,
Yeah.
which is great. And boy, do we need those. In the questions at the end of the session with Alex Wimberley a couple of weeks ago, I think it was Tony Phelan reminded us of the 4 last things, which were traditionally what many clergy preached on during Advent. 4 things being death, judgment, heaven, and hell.
Yeah.
And that obviously often took people to the book of Revelation, also known as the Apocalypse. And it seems to me that there's no getting away from the fact that our world feels more apocalyptic now than it has at any time, certainly in my life. And we know that much that we know and love and value may be coming to an end. That is difficult, and I think it's not just my age speaking. Obviously, life comes to an end on this earth for all of us at one time or another. It seems to me that there are 2. If we are thinking in apocalyptic terms, the book of Revelation was just one of many apocalypses that were written in those early years, and just one of them got into the New Testament. Some people shouldn't have done, but it did. There were many others written because that's part of how people saw things, and that was a religious vision, a spiritual vision, not just a political perception, for instance. It seems to me that at the moment, for many of us, there are 2 paramount threats. As if all the war and political turmoil and so on weren't enough. One is accelerating climate change. It was just great hearing from the Wellspring community last week about all their activism and their penguin suits and things. I mean, if you didn't hear that, then do get it off the website, because it was really lovely to hear what they're doing to try and confront and raise awareness about that whole cluster of issues. I think the other thing that has come that probably we wouldn't have said, I wouldn't have said certainly, if we'd been talking last Advent, is the uncontrolled experiment of artificial intelligence.
How interesting to frame it in that way. Yeah.
We know that some who developed AI now see it as a serious risk of that it will extinguish humankind entirely. But let's not go there today.
But not unlike the sense of Norman and George in the boat on the Sound of Iona and the atomic bomb,
an unknown new world.
An unknown new world. Living in apocalyptic times. What would be our revelation today? What is the container that offers us a narrative to guide us in these times when themes of life, death, heaven and hell, parallel love, joy, peace and hope. And what is it about?
And what will we do when, it seems that very soon our capabilities as humans will be outstripped by AI as much as we outstrip chimpanzees or octopuses. That's going to, the whole question of what it is to be human, what's important about it, let alone what it might mean to be created in the image of God. There's the existential challenges alongside all the other challenges that may come if people's jobs go because of AI and robotics and all that kind of thing. So what do I think are the questions for us and the resources against that background for intentional Christian communities like ourselves? I think that in times like this, we're brought back to what are the most essential spiritual practices of prayer and meditation that can help ground us in love and peace. Whatever is happening around us. Because if those twin threats continue in the ways that we think they are, the sense of insecurity and of anxiety for all our fellows in society. It's just
Mm.
all of us is going to keep ramping up. And so one is a matter of spiritual practices, I think.
Mm.
And in our program this coming year, we're trying to put in more really solid stuff that is about helping people with that.
Mm.
And then secondly, I think it's the networks of solidarity and community that
Yeah.
help us to know that we're not alone. And that's why my personal hope for Othona is that we will be thinking more about how we do that for
Yeah.
people when they're not here. We've become very, over the years, for all sorts of reasons that were good reasons, we've become very focused on the actual experience of visiting the centres. But for
Mhm.
most people who connect to Othona, that's something they hardly ever do, or in many cases can no longer do. They're too far away, they're too old, they're too tied up with other things, too busy. But they still want to keep in touch. And how do we actually provide a more
Mm.
palpable sense of that real community based in faith and love?
And growing out of the traditions that you are inheritors of
Yeah, yeah.
in that ground where you live, and also you have been molding and shaping since that revelatory moment on the Sound of Iona and other moments that inspired Norman and others to plant themselves in a place, and so to pray for the peace and the love and the justice that we seek, but to do it together in solidarity and in networks
Mm,
of solidarity and community. I love that, Tony. Thank you
mm,
so much. I wonder if we can just pause for a moment there
sure.
and
Yeah.
invite anybody that would like to if you want to put your hand up either electronically or visually, ideally put your electronic hand up. Claire, you have raised your hand. Do you want to come and join us up here and have a conversation? I'm going to add you.
Hey,
Claire, there you go.
I
Okay.
I think this is a question to both of you, really. Tony, you were mentioning about people who've joined the community who've perhaps been hurt by the church or, organised religion. I'm a newbie with all of this, so I'm just wondering, what is it that distinguishes intentional communities? How do you avoid perhaps some of the pitfalls that you get in organised religion? If
Mm.
they're coming to you, I mean, you are obviously in one big community, just like you are in a church. How do you avoid, um, the same things happening?
Mhm.
What's different?
Sure. I mean, Tony, do you want to have a go at that?
I'll have a quick go. And I first need to say I do have a hungry cat who's just beginning to make his presence heard. So that's, if you hear the odd meow, that's what it is. He can wait. And part of the answer to you, Claire, is that we don't avoid it. We can't fully avoid. We're human beings. When human beings get together in groups, power dynamics develop, all sorts of other things. We have our own backgrounds and personalities and so on. So we don't fully avoid those things. What we have often a degree of freedom because we are less prone to be seen as museum curators of a tradition that goes back centuries, and sometimes because the analogy I've always had in my mind is that we are like little kind of little dinghies or rowing skiffs compared to the super tankers of a large church, for instance, and that allows for, it does mean you can get swamped rather easily, but it also allows for maneuverability, an ability to experiment, as Ruth just said. However strong their insights, George MacLeod and Norman Motley, in setting up these communities, I think both of them would have known that things can't always stay the same, and they set them up to be flexible, growing, evolving entities.
And I would add to that, Claire, by saying all of the above, that we are, as the Iona community, are certainly not free from all the tensions and pitfalls that beset any human community, not least churches. And Norman and George and many of our members are members and fully engaged with mainstream churches while
Yes.
simultaneously being part of a community. And I've often described it as having three legs of a stool. I'm a member of the Presbyterian Church, and I'm also a Quaker and a member of the Iona Community. And I need one for the other to really come alive. And what I find within an intentional Christian community like the Iona Community is that there is a different kind of freedom. So I'm freer from one set of doctrinally based beliefs. And I join in with people from a whole range of denominations when I join with the Iona Community. So there's a huge freedom to question and to explore and experiment, which there often is in many of our churches. I think there's sometimes a false divide between the church as institution and the church as community. You know, we are all part of the great universal church of Christ, I believe, and almost entering into multiple memberships allows them all to fall away. And for all of them we remember that all of these are the best versions we can do of God's kingdom on earth. And there are many other examples of such communities. So for me, it's not an either or, but it's a real symbiotic relationship. What's your experience, Claire? Do you want to add anything, or yeah?
I mean, I know of plenty of people who've been hurt by the church, but I'm just wondering from what you said, like with the intentional communities, there's a greater diversity of denominations, and so perhaps there's a lot more openness.
But you'll also find in many denominations a huge range of views and a huge range of different kinds of people. So, you know, we can get ourselves tied up in knots sometimes with these boundaries that, you know, I guess the question is, what are people seeking and where are they finding the space to be fully themselves in their faith life with one another and with God? And where we find that sense of belonging, then how easy is it for us to plant ourselves there and take root there? And the answer to those questions is many and varied depending on who we are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with all that. And just recently, I was at the funeral of a wonderful woman called Fiona, and I know that for her, her involvement with Othona at a particular time when she first found us was crucial in helping her find her way back to faith and to her faith community.
Yeah.
I attended the funeral at the church where she became an elder, where she was really involved in all sorts of ways, quite moving. I didn't even know about some of them, and I was really so blessed to be there with her. But and sometimes funny little organisations like ours can at a particular moment help people do that bit of exploration that then feeds them back into many other areas of the worldwide church.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks very much, Claire. Would anybody else like to join us and ask a question or bring an insight? Yeah. You're going to have to just unmute yourself and let me know. I think I just scanning through my screens. That's the one drawback of Zoom, that I can't see everybody all at the same time. But I think, friends, if there are no other comments or questions, I would like to draw us to a close. We said we would finish within the hour and we're just about there. So this has been perfect timing. I'm just we're gonna close like we have in the last two sessions with inviting Tony to share a short blessing or a prayer from the Othona community as we head into this last half of Advent. Before we do, just a few closing words from me of thanks and of housekeeping. Just the obvious reminder, if you have enjoyed these sessions and you want to join up for the last of the 4 sessions, then all the links are on the iona.org.uk website. And I'll be joined next Monday live from Cape Town by Teresa, Bob, and John, who are both founding members and current members and leaders of the Full Mood Community in Cape Town. And they'll be sharing their responses to these stories of what it means to be an intentional Christian community and what particular offerings, questions, reflections might we have for the world at this time of Advent. These offerings, as all of our offerings during Advent, they're free to participate, but we do welcome donations. So if you are able to make a donation, these will go towards the wider work of the Iona community in the world. Tony, though, it remains for me to say a huge thank you to you for your wisdom and your insight, for your story, for the story of Othona. And as you reach your 80th birthday, beginning of your 9th decade, may you continue still to be
that is Othona, not me.
Othona, not you. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you for that clarification. May you continue to be a sanctuary and a light. And we will pray for you as we will pray for all of our sister communities across the globe now and into this next decade. Would you like to offer us a short prayer or a poem?
I'd like to offer you two things. If I may. The first is a very brief chant. We don't have the kind of breadth of resources that Iona and Wild Goose and so on bring, but we do have our own things. This is a very short chant, and it's words of Jesus from the Gospel of Thomas. And to me, it speaks not only of the universality of Christ, but actually of the Christ we discover just in everyday work as well. And it simply goes like this. Lift a stone and you will find me. Split a log and I am there. I am always there. Lift a stone and you will find me. Split a log and I am there. I am always there. Anyway, that's just a little taste of that.
That is beautiful, so elemental and so grounding, Tony. Thank you. Yeah.
And secondly, I've got to put something else on the screen. Where is it? There we are. Particularly when people come new to us, into our chapel here in Dorset, they might read a piece that tries to give an idea of the whole frame of reference of our worship. And the first two sections of that speak about the human search right from the beginning of human history for God, for the individual in community, and then the example of Jesus and our wish to honor all faiths as responses to the divine. And then this third section speaks very directly to individuals. And I thought I'd just share this because I think this can be, I'm sure it's many people's experience when they enter, for instance, the Abbey at Iona, but any of these special places. What you bring to this sacred place, nobody else can bring. What you draw from it, only you will know. Here together we find space to grow in awareness, to glimpse the inner lives of others, to learn patience when all is arid, to connect with the divine. If love is our only offering and thank you our only prayer, these are riches indeed. Wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome here to take part as you may in spirit and in truth.
Tony, thank you. And amen to that. What a beautiful way to end. We will share those words that you have shared. We will share them towards the end of the series as we circulate a final mailing to everyone who's signed up.
That's
But for
great.
now,
Yeah. And I'll include the 2 previous sections if I may, and then you'll
oh, that'd be lovely.
get the
Thank
whole
you.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
But we wish you well as you keep the rumour of God alive in these Advent times and in these times of real hunger and uncertainty. May we continue to find the revelations that we all need to keep that rumour alive. Go well, Tony, and go well, one and all. We will be back here again this time next week. Farewell.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.